Young, and the Restless spoilers. Next 2 week, full March 23 to April 3. The espresso machine hissed in the background, a sharp mechanical punctuation to the heavy silence hanging over the secluded private patio of Crimson Lights. The scent of roasted coffee beans and impending rain mingled in the cool Wisconsin air, but the three figures gathered around the wrought iron table were entirely oblivious to their surroundings. Sharon Rosales wrapped her hands tightly around her ceramic mug, the heat grounding her as she stared across the table. Beside her, Christine Blair sat with the rigid, uncompromising posture of a seasoned prosecutor, her eyes narrowed with a dangerous mix of determination and righteous fury. Across from both women sat Michael Baldwin. He looked utterly exhausted, the bespoke tailoring of his charcoal suit doing little to hide the profound tension radiating from his shoulders. "You're asking me to commit professional suicide," Cricket Michael murmured, his voice barely rising above the ambient noise of the coffee house. He rubbed his temples where a persistent headache had taken root the moment Christine had texted him a cryptic 911. No worse. "You're asking me to cross Victor Newman. Do you have a death wish? Because I certainly don't." "Victor is tearing his own family apart, Michael, and you know it," Sharon interjected, her voice soft but laced with an unyielding steel that she had forged through decades of surviving the Newman crossfire. "The tension at the ranch is suffocating. Nick is entirely alienated, Victoria is walking on eggshells, and the company is a war zone. The collateral damage is spilling out into Genoa City. We need to stop him before the fallout destroys innocent lives. My company, my family, none of us are safe. As long as Victor is on the warpath." Christine leaned forward, her piercing gaze locking onto Michael's. "We aren't asking you to be the silver bullet, Michael, but you have the gun. And you are the only one close enough to the target to pull the trigger. Victor trusts you. He lets you into the inner sanctum. We need you to be our eyes and ears. We need a man on the inside." Michael let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "A double agent. That's what you want. You want me to play Judas to the most ruthless, vindictive billionaire in the Midwest. If he catches me, Christine, he won't just disbar me. He will salt the earth where my career used to be. He will go after Lauren. He will go after my family. He won't catch you," Christine said, her tone absolute, "because you're smarter than him. You've always been smarter, Michael. You've spent years cleaning up his messes, burying his skeletons, and navigating his massive ego. You know how his mind works better than anyone. We have a plan, but it only works if you agree to step into the shadows." Michael looked away, watching the rain begin to streak the glass of the patio windows. He thought of his wife Lauren and the hard-won peace they had finally achieved. But then his mind drifted to the dark windowless rooms where Victor had recently demanded he cross ethical lines that even Michael found repulsive. He thought of the sheer moral rot he had been forced to cover up in the name of Newman Enterprises. The internal battle raged within him for a long, agonizing minute. Finally, the silver-haired lawyer exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding for a decade. He slowly turned his gaze back to the two women. "God help me," Michael whispered, a dark, cynical smile touching the corners of his mouth. "I'm in. Tell me what I have to do." The air in the CEO office of Newman Enterprises was always kept a few degrees too cold, a psychological tactic Victor Newman employed to keep his subordinates perpetually on edge. The monolithic glass desk dominated the room, but it was the man standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows who commanded all the gravity. Victor stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring down at the sprawling metropolis of Genoa City as if he were a feudal lord surveying his fiefdom. When the heavy oak doors clicked open, Victor didn't turn around immediately. "Come in, Michael," his baritone voice rumbled, vibrating against the glass. "What news do you bring me of the vultures circling my empire?" Michael stepped into the room, his briefcase gripped firmly in his hand. He played the role of the loyal consigliere flawlessly, his posture deferential but confident. I've intercepted some troubling chatter," Victor Michael said, approaching the desk and laying down a thick leather-bound dossier. It was a masterpiece of fabricated intelligence, meticulously forged by Christine's underground contacts. "Your rivals are making aggressive moves. The Abbott family and Chancellor Winters are secretly pooling capital to launch a hostile takeover of a European tech conglomerate. They are trying to outflank you globally." Victor finally turned his dark eyes, locking onto the dossier. He picked it up, flipping through the pages of doctored financial projections and fake intercepted emails. A slow, predatory smirk spread across his weathered face. "Fools!" Victor sneered, tossing the folder back onto the desk. "They are so blinded by their global ambitions that they leave their domestic flanks entirely exposed. Let them bleed their capital dry in Europe. I will crush them right here in our own backyard. That was my assessment as well. Michael agreed, smoothly burying the cold sweat that threatened to break out on his forehead. If they are distracted overseas, it leaves the local tech sector vulnerable. You could sweep in and dominate the market without firing a single shot. Victor stepped closer, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over the lawyer. You have done exceptionally well. Michael Victor praised, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. In a world full of betrayers and ungrateful children, you have proven yourself indispensable. Keep feeding me this intelligence. We will let them hang themselves with their own rope. Of course, Victor. I live to serve, Michael replied, his charming smile masking the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The hook was set. Victor had swallowed the bait entirely. Across town, in the secure, heavily encrypted confines of a luxury suite at the Genoa City Athletic Club, Christine and Sharon were already moving to the next phase of the operation. The suite had been transformed into a makeshift command center. Whiteboards covered in corporate flowcharts lined the walls, and a state-of-the-art laptop glowed brightly on the glass coffee table. A burner phone resting on the table buzzed violently. Christine snatched it up, her eyes scanning the encrypted text message. It's from Michael, she announced, her pulse quickening. He just left Newman Enterprises. Victor bought the European distraction, and just as we predicted, Michael has forwarded us Victor's actual domestic strategy. Sharon rushed over, leaning over Christine's shoulder to read the glowing screen. Look at this, Sharon breathed, pointing to a series of shell companies listed in the data dump. Victor is moving on the prime commercial real estate in the tech corridor. He thinks the competition is too distracted to notice. If he secures those parcels, he creates a monopoly. He'll choke out every independent startup in Wisconsin, including Cassidy First Technology. Not today, he won't, Christine said, her fingers flying across the keyboard with lethal precision. We have a 8-hour head start. I'm drafting preemptive injunctions under 3 different blind trusts. We are going to use his own leaked intelligence to anonymously tip off the zoning board about environmental concerns on those specific plots. By the time Victor's lawyers try to close the deal, the properties will be locked up in municipal red tape for the next 5 years. Sharon smiled, a fierce protective light in her eyes. She immediately began liquidating minor assets and maneuvering her company's capital perfectly, steering her business out of the invisible trap Victor had set. Because they knew exactly where Victor was going to strike, they were essentially playing chess against a man who didn't realize his opponent could see his entire side of the board. 2 days later, the fallout hit the Newman Ranch like a Category 5 hurricane. Victor stood in his opulent living room, his face a mask of unbridled fury. He hurled a crystal tumbler against the stone fireplace. It shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces, the amber liquid staining the hearth. Michael stood a few feet away, his hands folded neatly in front of him, playing the role of the deeply concerned advisor to perfection. Someone is anticipating my moves. Victor roared, pacing the length of the room like a caged lion. Every single shell company I deployed to purchase the tech corridor was blocked. Injunctions filed out of thin air. Anonymous tips to the zoning board. This is not a coincidence, Michael. There is a massive conspiracy against my family, against my legacy. It certainly appears that way. Victor, Michael said, softly injecting just the right amount of outrage into his tone. The precision of these blocks, it suggests someone has intimate knowledge of your portfolio. Victor stopped pacing and turned to Michael, his chest heaving. He reached out and grasped Michael's shoulder. The physical contact was rare, an intimate gesture from a man who trusted almost no one. My own family is too busy squabbling over the scraps of my empire to pull off something this sophisticated. Victor growled, his eyes dark with paranoia. Someone is leaking my strategies to the outside. But you are the only one I can trust, Michael. You are the only man in my inner circle with clean hands. Michael nodded, solemnly meeting Victor's gaze without blinking. I will not rest until we find the mole, Victor. I will personally audit the executive staff. I will tear through the servers. We will find the traitor and we will ruin them. Do it, Victor commanded, his voice dripping with venom. Burn them to the ground. The irony was thick enough to choke on, but Michael used the mandate to his absolute advantage. Late that night, the towering glass monolith of Newman Enterprises was dark save for the emergency lights and the soft glow of a single monitor in the executive server room. Michael sat at the terminal, the silence of the building pressing in on him. He had bypassed the external firewalls effortlessly using the master access credentials Victor had willingly handed over to him to hunt the mole. His fingers danced across the keyboard as he dug deep into the hidden encrypted directories of the Newman mainframe. He was looking for the smoking gun, and it didn't take long to find it. Buried under layers of dummy corporations was a folder ominously titled Project Icarus. Michael opened the files, his eyes widening in the blue light of the screen. It was worse than he and Christine had imagined. Here was the undeniable proof of Victor's most brazen illegal maneuvers. There were records of massive offshore accounts used for tax evasion, wiretaps placed on rival CEOs, and a highly detailed ledger proving the bribery of a federal judge in a recent antitrust case. It was a treasure trove of corporate espionage and outright felonies. The download progress bar crawled across the screen. 70%, 80%. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. Every creak of the building sounded like approaching footsteps. He imagined Audra Charles or a late-night security detail walking through the door at any second. The sweat beaded on his forehead. 95%. Asterisk. Complete. Asterisk. Michael yanked the encrypted flash drive from the port, shoved it into his breast pocket, and seamlessly erased his digital footprints. He walked out of the building, the cool night air hitting him like a physical blow. An hour later, the dense rolling fog of Lake Michigan had settled over Chancellor Park, turning the manicured lawns into a ghostly landscape. Michael stood near the stone fountain, his collar pulled up against the damp chill. From the shadows, Christine emerged, wearing a dark trench coat, her eyes scanning the perimeter. "Did you get it?" she asked, her voice a breathless whisper. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver flash drive. He held it out to her, his hand trembling slightly from the residual adrenaline. "It's radioactive, Cricket. Handle with care. What's on this drive isn't just enough to win a lawsuit. It's enough to dismantle the entire Newman empire. Bribery, wiretapping, market manipulation. It's all there." Christine took the drive, her fingers closing tightly around the cold metal. "You did it, Michael. You actually did it. Just make sure it counts," he warned, stepping back into the fog. "Because when this blows up, the blast radius is going to take out half the city."
The next morning, the atmosphere in the GCAC suite was electric. Sharon and Christine sat side by side analyzing the payload. The data was beyond their wildest dreams.
They had been preparing for a massive multi-billion-dollar arbitration hearing regarding Victor's aggressive monopolization of the regional tech industry. They had expected a grueling uphill battle, but with this information, the dynamic had shifted completely. "Look at this." Christine said, a predatory, triumphant smile touching her lips as she highlighted a document. "He's planning to use a forged environmental report to devalue Cassidy First Technology during the upcoming merger dispute. But we have the original unaltered report right here, along with the wire transfer he used to pay off the inspector." Sharon let out a breath, feeling a profound sense of relief wash over her. The crushing anxiety that had plagued her for weeks was finally lifting. "He's going to walk right into that courtroom thinking he's invincible," Sharon murmured, shaking her head. "He thinks he has us completely cornered. He expects a coronation," Christine corrected, her eyes gleaming with the anticipation of a prosecutor about to deliver the final blow. "But we're going to give him an execution. We have the decisive advantage. When I drop this evidence into the legal record, it won't just win the lawsuit. It will trigger a federal investigation." Sharon felt the sheer gravity of what they were about to do. This will change Genoa City forever. Victor has never faced a defeat like this. He won't know what hit him. And that, Christine said softly, is exactly why it's going to work. That evening, the ambient, sultry jazz music played softly over the speakers at Society. The upscale restaurant was packed with Genoa City's elite, but all eyes subtly gravitated toward the VIP booth in the back. Victor Newman sat perfectly composed, nursing a glass of rare scotch. Michael Baldwin sat across from him, a glass of bourbon resting in his hand. The calm before the storm was palpable, though Victor was entirely oblivious to the dark clouds gathering on his horizon. "Tomorrow is a big day," Michael Victor said, his voice laced with supreme arrogant confidence. "The arbitration hearing commences. We will crush the opposition. We will secure the tech sector, and we will finally root out the traitors who have dared to conspire against me." Michael smiled, a perfectly practiced expression of loyalty and camaraderie. He looked at the ruthless billionaire, knowing that the sword of Damocles was hanging over Victor's head by a single fraying thread. And Michael was the one holding the scissors. He had maintained his cover flawlessly. The trap was set, the evidence was secured, and the timer was ticking down to zero. Victor raised his crystal glass, the amber liquid, catching the dim light of the restaurant. "To loyalty, Michael, the rarest commodity in this world." Michael picked up his bourbon, the clink of the glasses ringing out like a death knell in the quiet booth. He looked directly into Victor Newman's eyes, hiding the absolute earth-shattering devastation he was about to unleash upon the man. "To getting exactly what we deserve," Victor Michael replied smoothly, taking a slow sip of his drink. The jazz music swelled, masking the sound of the impending doom that hung over the Newman family. Michael set his glass down, waiting in the shadows of his own deception, ready for the moment the shockwave would finally rock Genoa City to its very core. The neon bleed of the Las Vegas Strip felt like a cruel, flashing mockery against the suffocating darkness of the narrow alleyway. Adam Newman adjusted the collar of his dark leather jacket, his sharp eyes scanning the shadows with the practiced paranoia of a man who had spent too much of his life looking over his shoulder. But his attention was continually forcefully dragged back to the man trembling violently against the damp brick wall. Nick Newman, his brother, the perennial golden boy of Genoa City, looked like a hollowed-out shell of himself. Sweat beaded heavily on Nick's forehead, matting his thick hair to his skull, while his hands shook with a violent tremor that rattled his broad shoulders. The fentanyl withdrawal was tearing through Nick with the merciless subtlety of a runaway freight train. It was a nightmare that had spiraled out of control, a brutal dependency that had brought the mighty Newman heir to his knees. "Keep it together, Nick," Adam muttered his voice, a low, gravelly command laced with a complicated, bitter mix of pity and profound irritation. "We are entirely too exposed out here." "I can't. Adam, my skin is crawling. It feels like my bones are turning to splintered glass." Nick gasped his breath, hitching as a violent shiver racked his frame. He gripped the lapels of his own coat, his knuckles stark white in the dim flickering light of a broken street lamp. He doubled over, retching dryly into the shadows. I just need something to take the edge off. Just a fraction. I can't focus on the plan. There is no edge to take off. You are going cold turkey, and you are going to survive it because you have no other choice." Adam replied, his tone devoid of sympathy, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of genuine concern. He stepped closer, grabbing Nick by the shoulders and forcing him to stand upright. "Listen to me. We didn't cross the country and plunge into the absolute worst underbelly of this city for you to fall apart in an alley. We are here for Matt Clark. He is alive, Nick. The ghost is breathing and he is plotting against our family. If we don't find him first, he will destroy everything we hold dear. I need you sharp." Nick squeezed his eyes shut, letting out a ragged groan that sounded more animal than human. Matt Clark, he whispered the name, tasting like ash on his tongue. The mere mention of the man, a monster from their past who was supposed to be long dead and buried, was enough to send a fresh wave of adrenaline fighting through the agonizing haze of the narcotics withdrawal. "I'll be fine. Just get me somewhere safe. Go do what you have to do." Adam guided his brother down the alley, pushing open the rusted metal door of a cheap off-the-books motel room he had secured under a fake name. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke, cheap disinfectant, and desperation. He practically threw Nick onto the sagging mattress. "Lock the door behind me. Do not open it for anyone, not even housekeeping. If I'm not back in an hour, take the burner, phone call the number programmed into it, and get the hell out of Vegas." Adam instructed, his eyes locking onto Nick's dilated, bloodshot pupils. "Where are you going?" Nick managed to ask, curling into a tight ball as another wave of agonizing muscle cramps seized his legs. "To see an old friend. Someone who knows the pulse of this city better than anyone," Adam said, turning toward the door. "Someone who knew me when I wasn't Adam Newman." Leaving the suffocating confines of the motel, Adam navigated the labyrinthine streets of Vegas, moving away from the glitz of the main casinos and into the grittier, unforgiving industrial district. His destination was a dilapidated warehouse that served as a front for high-stakes illegal poker games and information brokering. He slipped through the side entrance, moving with the silent predatory grace of the man he used to be in this town, Spider. The back room was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of expensive bourbon and cheap cigars. Sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, shuffling a deck of cards with mesmerizing fluid precision, was Riza Thompson. She was as striking as Adam remembered, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, elegant style, her sharp eyes missing absolutely nothing. "I heard a rumor that a ghost was walking the streets of my city," Riza said, not looking up from the cards. Her voice was smooth, carrying a dangerous undertone, but I didn't think Spider would ever be foolish enough to crawl back into my web. "Hello, Riza," Adam said, stepping fully into the light, keeping his hands visible and his posture relaxed. "It's been a long time. I need information, and I'm willing to pay handsomely for it." Riza finally looked up, her gaze raking over him with a mixture of amusement and icy disdain. Adam Newman, now isn't it, the billionaire prodigal son? You left a lot of messes behind when you shed your skin, Spider. Messes I had to clean up. And I compensated you for your trouble, Adam countered smoothly, taking a step closer to the desk. But I'm not here to reminisce about the good old days. I'm looking for someone, a ghost just like me. Matt Clark. The moment the name left Adam's lips, the atmosphere in the room shifted violently. The ambient noise of the city outside seemed to vanish, leaving a vacuum of suffocating tension. Riza's hands stopped moving. The cards fell to the desk. In a blur of motion so fast, Adam barely had time to register it. Riza reached beneath the mahogany surface and drew a gleaming silver-plated revolver, leveling it directly at Adam's chest. Adam froze, his heart hammering against his ribs, though his face remained a mask of stone. Riza, what the hell is this? Matt Clark is not a man you simply ask about. Adam Riza whispered, her eyes wide, darting frantically toward the frosted glass of the office door before locking back onto him. Her hands, usually so steady, gripped the weapon with white-knuckled intensity. He is a plague. And anyone who comes sniffing around for him brings the infection with them. Put the gun down, Riza, Adam said, his voice dangerously low. You know me. You know I don't bleed easily. I know that you are a dead man walking, she hissed, her finger tightening on the trigger. Adam braced himself, his mind calculating the distance between them, the angle of the barrel, the odds of him crossing the room before she could fire. But as he stared into Riza's eyes, he saw something that didn't fit. There was no murderous intent in her gaze. There was fear, yes, but also a desperate, hyper-focused calculation. She wasn't looking at his chest. She was looking past him. She was looking at the shadows, stretching beneath the door. Click! The safety came off. Goodbye, Spider, Riza shouted, her voice artificially loud, theatrical. Bang. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, a concussive roar that rattled the windows and sent a shockwave of sound tearing through the room. The smell of burning cordite instantly filled the air, acrid and sharp. Adam flinched instinctively, throwing himself to the side, but even as he moved, his brilliant analytical mind connected the dots. The bullet hadn't even come close to him. It had sailed high and wide, shattering a large decorative mirror on the wall behind him with a spectacular crash of falling glass. It was a performance, a staged execution. Adam hit the floor, rolling behind a heavy leather armchair. He didn't miss a beat. If Riza was putting on a show, she needed a co-star, and Adam Newman was nothing if not a masterful liar. Arg. You bitch, Adam roared, clutching his shoulder as if he had been struck, his voice echoing with fabricated agony. He kicked out violently with his leg, sending a small side table crashing into a shelf of expensive liquor bottles. Glass shattered, liquid spilled, and the room descended into manufactured chaos. Riza moved with lightning speed. She fired a second shot into the ceiling times, bang times, showering the room in plaster dust, then vaulted over the mahogany desk. She landed silently next to Adam, her eyes blazing with adrenaline. He's got men outside. Riza breathed her voice, barely a whisper, against the ringing in Adam's ears. Matt Clark's hounds. They've been watching me for days, waiting for you to show up. I gathered, Adam whispered back, giving her a sharp nod of respect. What's the play? We make them think you're dead, or at least dying, and we get the hell out of here before they breach the room to confirm the kill. Riza instructed quickly. She pointed toward a heavy bookshelf built into the far wall. Service corridor? It leads to the underground parking garage. Move! Adam didn't hesitate. He grabbed a heavy brass lamp from the floor and hurled it at the frosted glass door of the office, shattering it outward to keep the illusion of a violent struggle alive. I'll kill you, Riza, he bellowed for the benefit of the men lurking in the hallway, his voice thick with faux desperation. Riza slammed her hand against a hidden latch behind the desk. The bookshelf swung open silently on well-oiled hinges, revealing a dark, narrow passageway. She shoved Adam inside and slipped in right behind him, pulling the heavy shelf shut just as the heavy oak doors of the office were kicked open from the outside. Through the thin crack in the hidden door, Adam and Riza held their breath, plunged into absolute darkness, listening intently. Heavy boots crunched over the broken glass. 3 men stepped into the ruined office, their weapons drawn, tactical flashlights cutting through the thick cloud of plaster dust and gun smoke. And then a 4th man entered. The rhythmic, confident click of expensive dress shoes on hardwood flooring announced his arrival. Adam felt his blood run cold. He pressed his eye to the tiny sliver of light between the hinges. It was Matt Clark. The man looked older, the years having etched cruel lines into his face, but the malicious, arrogant smirk remained exactly the same. Matt surveyed the destruction, the shattered mirror, the overturned furniture, the bullet holes in the ceiling. He took a deep breath, savoring the smell of gunpowder. While Matt's voice rang out, smooth and dripping with venom, "Where is the body I want to see the great Adam Newman bleeding out on the floor?" One of the heavily armed henchmen kicked the overturned leather chair aside, sweeping his flashlight over the empty space. He paused, shining the light on the puddle of dark liquid spreading across the floor. He knelt down, swiping a finger through it and bringing it to his nose. "It's not blood, boss," the henchman said, his voice trembling slightly. "It's bourbon. The room is empty." Matt Clark's smirk vanished, replaced instantly by a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the impossible reality. "Empty," he roared, his voice cracking like a whip. "What do you mean, empty? We heard the shots. We heard him screaming. There is no other way out of this room." They must have slipped past us, Mr. Clark. "Or there's a trapdoor," another goon stammered, frantically checking the closets.